New York City, the mid-1960s. The Mafia was at the height of its power. 5 powerful families ruled the underworld, their reach extending from the street corners of Brooklyn to the casinos of Las Vegas. But within one family, the Bonannos, a storm was brewing. A storm that would erupt into betrayal, kidnappings, and open warfare on the streets. It would become known as the Bonanno War, a bloody feud that nearly destroyed one of New York's most feared crime syndicates. Joe Bonanno wasn't like the flashy gangsters that filled newspapers. He was quiet, calculating, and deeply traditional. Born in Sicily, he immigrated to America as a boy and rose quickly through the underworld ranks during Prohibition. By the 1930s, Lucky Luciano's creation of the Mafia Commission cemented his role as one of the 5 families' founding bosses. While Luciano and others enjoyed the spotlight, Bonanno preferred the shadows. He built his empire through discipline, loyalty, and discretion. By the 1950s, he controlled lucrative rackets in construction, garment trades, and loan sharking. He also had strong ties to Canada, giving his family unique power in international smuggling, especially heroin. But beneath the surface, Bonanno had bigger ambitions. He saw himself not just as one boss among equals, but as a leader capable of steering the entire Mafia Commission. And that ambition would plant the seeds of war. In the early 1960s, rumors swirled that Bonanno wanted to eliminate rivals and dominate the commission outright. He allegedly plotted to assassinate bosses Carlo Gambino, Gaetano Lucchese, and even Tommy Lucchese, a plan that, if true, would have been catastrophic. When word of this plot reached the commission, alarm bells rang. To challenge the balance of power was an unforgivable crime. The other families began watching Bonanno closely, waiting for their moment to strike. Inside his own family, cracks were already showing. Some of Bonanno's lieutenants questioned his judgment. Others whispered that his son, Bill Bonanno, was being groomed too quickly for leadership. Nepotism was a dangerous game in the Mafia. As one FBI memo from 1963 put it, the Bonanno family is divided. Half remain loyal to Joe, half are restless. The tension is palpable. Then came the shock that would ignite the war. On October 21, 1964, Joe Bonanno vanished off the streets of Manhattan. Witnesses claimed he was walking near his lawyer's office when he was grabbed by unknown men and shoved into a car. Hours turned to days, days to weeks. The newspapers buzzed. Had the boss of one of New York's 5 families been kidnapped? Theories swirled. Some said his rivals on the commission ordered the abduction to neutralize him. Others whispered it was an inside job, that Bonanno staged his own disappearance to avoid a hit. Inside the family, chaos exploded. Without Joe, factions formed. His loyalists rallied around his son Bill Bonanno. Opponents sided with Gaspar di Gregorio, a longtime capo with backing from the commission. For the first time in Mafia history, a full-scale civil war loomed inside a single family. The commission wasted no time. Declaring Joe Bonanno unreliable and dangerous, they appointed Gaspar di Gregorio as the new head of the family. Di Gregorio had the pedigree, a respected old-school mobster with decades of service. But more importantly, he was seen as controllable. The other bosses believed Di Gregorio would stabilize the family and keep the peace. Joe's loyalists, however, refused to recognize the change. To them, Di Gregorio was a usurper, a puppet installed by outside forces. They derisively called themselves the Bonanno Loyalists and vowed never to bow. And so the stage was set. 2 factions claiming the same family, each armed, each determined to destroy the other. By 1965, Brooklyn was on edge. Cafes, social clubs, and street corners buzzed with whispers of the coming war. Soldiers loyal to Joe Bonanno and his son Bill began shadowing Di Gregorio's men. Gunmen prowled neighborhoods, waiting for orders. The FBI, already watching closely, couldn't believe what they were seeing. One agent later recalled, "We had never seen anything like it. Mobsters weren't supposed to fight civil wars. But here they were, armed to the teeth, ready to slaughter each other in the streets." The first shots came soon after. Drive-bys, ambushes, beatings. The violence escalated quickly. Every week brought new casualties. Ordinary citizens lived in fear of being caught in the crossfire. Newspapers coined the conflict the Banana War, a mocking play on Joe Bonanno's nickname, Joe Bananas. But for those inside the family, nothing about it was funny. Bill Bonanno, Joe's son, became the lightning rod for the conflict. At just 30 years old, he was thrust into a war he could barely control. DiGregorio's men saw him as weak, inexperienced, and arrogant. They targeted him relentlessly. In January 1966, one of the most infamous attacks took place. Bill Bonanno was attending a family meeting in Brooklyn when DiGregorio's faction ambushed the gathering. Dozens of shots rang out. Miraculously, Bill escaped with his life, but several of his men were wounded. The message was clear. The DiGregorio faction would stop at nothing to erase Joe Bonanno's bloodline. Bill later recalled, "I was marked for death. Every time I walked into a restaurant, I wondered if the next face I saw would be the last." As bodies piled up, the FBI intensified its surveillance. Wiretaps, informants, and hidden microphones revealed the depth of the feud. Agents recorded conversations where soldiers openly debated which faction to join, and whether loyalty to Joe was worth dying for. One taped conversation captured a soldier lamenting, "It used to be about respect. Now it's just brother killing brother. This ain't Cosa Nostra anymore. It's a slaughterhouse." But even as the FBI listened, they hesitated to intervene too strongly. The war was tearing the Bonannos apart from the inside, weakening the Mafia's grip on the city. For law enforcement, this was a rare opportunity. By the late 1960s, the Bonanno family was unrecognizable. Soldiers were dead. Leaders were disgraced. The commission had lost patience. And yet, Joe Bonanno himself, the man whose disappearance started it all, was about to return. For nearly 2 years, Joe Bonanno's whereabouts were a mystery. Some swore he was dead, buried in a shallow grave by rivals. Others believed he was hiding in Arizona, watching from the shadows. But in 1966, he reappeared, alive, defiant, and claiming he had been abducted, held captive by unknown men, and then released. His sudden return sent shockwaves through the underworld. For his loyalists, it was a sign of hope. Their leader was back, ready to reclaim control. For his enemies, it was infuriating. They had assumed the war was nearly won. Now the man who had started it all stood once more at the center of the storm. Bonanno wasted no time. He declared Gaspar DiGregorio illegitimate, branded him a traitor, and insisted that the commission had no right to interfere in family matters. His presence re-energized his followers, but it also escalated the violence. With Bonanno back, the fighting intensified. Soldiers were gunned down in drive-bys. Social clubs turned into war zones. In one chilling incident, a DiGregorio loyalist was ambushed outside his home. Dozens of bullets tore into his car, leaving him slumped over the wheel. The FBI described the war zone in stark terms. It was unprecedented. This was not mobsters protecting rackets. This was vendetta pure and simple. No one was safe. Even within the loyalist camp, paranoia spread. Soldiers wondered if Joe Bonanno had really been kidnapped or if he had staged the whole thing. Was their boss a victim or a manipulator willing to sacrifice them all for his own survival? Sensing the war was spiraling out of control, neutral voices within the Mafia tried to broker peace. Meetings were arranged between representatives of the Bonanno loyalists and the DiGregorio faction. But every attempt collapsed. In one infamous meeting in 1966, peace negotiators gathered in Brooklyn. As talks began, DiGregorio's gunmen suddenly opened fire. Chairs flipped, men dove for cover, and gunshots echoed through the night. Bill Bonanno narrowly escaped with his life. From that moment, there was no turning back. The war would continue until one side was annihilated. Although DiGregorio had the commission's blessing, he quickly revealed himself as a weak leader. His health began to fail and his control over his soldiers slipped. Many questioned whether he had the stomach for prolonged conflict. The commission grew frustrated. Their chosen replacement was floundering. Worse, the violence was attracting unwanted attention from the FBI, newspapers, and even Washington lawmakers. Behind closed doors, the commission began reconsidering its support. Perhaps a new figure was needed to stabilize the Bonanno family. Into this chaos stepped Paul Sciacca, a shrewd and ambitious capo. Unlike De Gregorio, Sciacca commanded respect in the streets. He was ruthless, calculating, and willing to use extreme violence to impose order. By 1968, the commission shifted its backing to Sciacca, effectively sidelining De Gregorio. For the Bonanno family, this marked yet another fracture. Now there were three camps: Joe Bonanno's loyalists, De Gregorio's fading faction, and Sciacca's rising power. The Bonanno War had splintered the family beyond recognition. As Sciacca consolidated his power, the violence reached its peak. Brooklyn became a patchwork of ambush sites, safe houses, and funeral processions. One FBI surveillance team captured a chilling exchange between two soldiers debating the war. Soldier A: "You with Joe or with Sciacca?" Soldier B: "I'm with whoever keeps me alive." Soldier A: "Then you ain't with nobody, and that means you're next." The tape underscored the paranoia gripping the family. Allegiances shifted daily. Soldiers defected, informants whispered, and loyalty meant little when survival was at stake. Perhaps the most dramatic moment of the Bonanno War came in 1968. Bill Bonanno, still his father's right-hand man, was lured into a trap by Sciacca loyalists. He was ambushed, beaten, and held hostage. According to FBI reports, he was told bluntly, "Your father's time is over. If you don't walk away, you'll die screaming." Though he was eventually released, the kidnapping humiliated the loyalist faction. It proved that Joe Bonanno's bloodline was vulnerable, and that Sciacca was winning. By the late 1960s, Joe Bonanno faced reality. His health was failing. His family was fractured. His empire was crumbling. In 1968, he shocked the underworld by announcing his retirement. He moved permanently to Arizona, retreating into a quiet life far from New York's bloody streets. For a man who had once dreamed of dominating the commission, it was a humiliating exit. The commission officially recognized Paul Sciacca as the new boss of the Bonanno family. But the damage was done. The Bonanno War had left the Bonannos shattered, their reputation in ruins. The Bonanno War's aftermath was devastating. Dozens dead. Soldiers on both sides were killed in ambushes and shootouts. Family splintered. The Bonannos lost respect within the Mafia commission, becoming the weakest of the five families. A FBI emboldened. The chaos gave law enforcement unprecedented insight into Mafia operations. Informants grew bolder, wiretaps became more effective, and federal investigations tightened. The once proud Bonanno family was now seen as unstable, vulnerable, and broken. But the story didn't end with Joe Bonanno's retirement. When Joe Bonanno stepped aside in 1968, it marked the official end of his reign. But the scars of the Bonanno War lingered. For years afterward, the Bonanno family was seen as damaged goods. The commission no longer trusted them. Allies turned their backs. Rivals seized rackets. And the FBI, who had been watching carefully, now had files thicker than telephone books on Bonanno soldiers, associates, and operations. One federal agent later remarked, "The Bonanno War was a gift. They were so busy killing each other. They forgot we were listening." The Bureau had tapped phones, flipped soldiers, and tracked meetings. For decades, the Mafia had survived by projecting secrecy and unity. The Bonanno War shattered both illusions. With Paul Sciacca officially installed as boss, the Bonanno family limped forward. Sciacca was competent, but the family had lost its shine. The Genovese and Gambino families now dominated New York, leaving the Bonannos struggling to hold onto rackets. By the early 1970s, leadership shifted again, this time to Natale Joe Diamond Evola, a respected capo. But Evola's reign was brief. In 1973, he died of natural causes, leaving a power vacuum. Into that vacuum stepped Philip "Rusty" Rostelli, a cunning mobster who managed to seize the top spot. Rostelli would rule on and off for decades. But the family he inherited was not the one Joe Bonanno had built. It was fractured, mistrusted, and under constant surveillance. Meanwhile, Joe Bonanno settled into his Arizona exile. From a comfortable home in Tucson, he watched the mafia world he once helped build transform without him. He was not content to disappear quietly. Though weakened by age and illness, Bonanno still harbored a desire to shape his legacy. He wanted the world to know his version of the story. In the 1980s, he did the unthinkable. He broke the Mafia's sacred code of silence, omertà. In 1983, Bonanno published his memoir, A Man of Honor, the autobiography of Joseph Bonanno. It was explosive. Never before had a mafia boss, one who sat on the commission who had ruled one of New York's 5 families, gone public with such intimate details. In the book, Bonanno recounted his rise, the creation of the commission, and his vision of a mafia governed by rules and honor. He painted himself as a reluctant warrior, a man forced into the Bonanno War by treachery and betrayal. But to law enforcement, it was a goldmine. Bonanno had confirmed details investigators had only suspected. He had laid bare the inner workings of La Cosa Nostra. The underworld reacted with fury. Mobsters across New York felt betrayed. For decades, Joe Bonanno had insisted he was a man of principle. Now, in their eyes, he was nothing more than a rat in silk pajamas. While Bonanno wrote books, his family in New York faced relentless FBI pressure. By the 1970s and 1980s, new tools gave law enforcement the upper hand. The RICO Act, the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, allowed prosecutors to target entire mafia families, not just individual crimes. Wiretaps, surveillance, and flipped informants became devastating weapons. The Bonannos were especially vulnerable. Their fractured loyalties and weakened structure made them easier targets. Soldiers flipped under pressure. Captains betrayed one another. What began with the Bonanno Wars infighting now became a cascade of defections. The greatest humiliation came in the late 1970s and early 1980s. An undercover FBI agent named Joseph Pistone, working under the alias Donnie Brasco, infiltrated the Bonanno family for 6 years. He attended meetings, collected money, and even received offers to become a made man. His work led to over 100 indictments. When the operation was revealed in 1981, it stunned the underworld. For years, the Bonannos had been fooled by an outsider. No other family had ever been so thoroughly infiltrated. One Gambino capo sneered, "The Bonannos? They let the feds sit at their table. They're finished." The Donnie Brasco case cemented the Bonanno family's reputation as the weakest of the 5 families. And it was the Bonanno War that had started the decline. The Bonanno War had normalized betrayal. Once soldiers saw that bosses could abandon them, many began rethinking their loyalties. By the 1980s and 1990s, the Mafia was plagued by rats. Sammy the Bull Gravano flipped on John Gotti. Michael Franzese walked away. Dozens of Bonanno soldiers turned state's evidence. Each defection brought more indictments, more wiretaps, more trials. The Mafia's power eroded with every courtroom confession. By the 1990s, the Bonanno family was a shell of its former self. While other families still commanded power, the Bonannos were seen as fragile and compromised. The Bonanno War had been more than an internal feud. It was the first crack in the Mafia's armor. It showed the world that the Mafia could bleed from within. A former FBI director summed it up. "The Mafia didn't die because of us. It died because it turned on itself." The Bonanno War was the beginning of the end. Joe Bonanno lived to see it all. He witnessed his family's collapse, the trials, the betrayals, and the erosion of the Mafia he had once helped shape. In 2002, at the age of 97, Joe Bonanno died quietly in Arizona. He had outlived most of his rivals, his friends, and even his enemies, but his legacy remained toxic. To some, he was a pioneer, a visionary who shaped the American Mafia. To others, he was a coward who abandoned his family and betrayed omertà. His name would forever be tied to the bloody civil war that bore his family name, the Bonanno War. Even after decades of arrests and betrayals, the Mafia never disappeared completely. The Bonanno family, though battered, still exists. Whispers of rackets in Queens, gambling in Brooklyn, and loan sharking in the Bronx persist. Federal indictments in the 2000s and 2010s proved that, while weakened, the 5 families were not dead. So the question remains, Did the Banana War destroy the Mafia, or did it simply force it underground, waiting for the right moment to rise again? Because in the shadows of New York, behind closed doors of social clubs, and in the whispers of the streets, the name Bonanno still carries weight. And perhaps, just perhaps, the war never truly ended. For more chilling stories on the Mafia, subscribe to the channel.